Your poor parents leave this wedding, or you become my ex-wife today.
Don't throw your future away because of us.
We survived poverty. We'll survive this too.
You've sacrificed too much for me.
One last time. Me or them?
I choose my parents.
Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to change everything. As the heavy cathedral doors slowly closed behind Emily and her parents, no one moved. Not Alexander. Not the guests. Not even the orchestra. The only sound was the echo of Emily's wedding heels as she walked farther away from the life she had spent 4 years building. Outside, reporters immediately rushed toward her. Emily, do you regret your decision? Was the wedding canceled because of your parents? Did you really choose them over a billionaire? Emily never answered. Instead, she opened the back door of an old taxi for Margaret before helping Robert inside. Only after both of them were seated comfortably did she climb in herself. As the taxi pulled away, she looked back one last time. Alexander was still standing at the entrance of the cathedral. He didn't chase her. He simply watched until the taxi disappeared around the corner. For almost 20 minutes, no one inside the car spoke. Margaret quietly wiped tears from her cheeks. Robert stared out the window. Emily held both of their hands. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. I'm sorry. Emily looked confused. For what? For today. Emily smiled softly. You have nothing to apologize for. Margaret lowered her eyes. If we had stayed home, you would be married right now. Emily gently shook her head. No, I would have been married to a man who wanted me to abandon the people who raised me. Robert finally spoke. And that's exactly why we begged you to stay. Emily looked at him in surprise. Dad, you wanted me to marry him? Robert nodded. More than anything. Emily couldn't understand. After everything he said, Robert smiled sadly. People sometimes fail the biggest test of their lives. They also deserve the chance to become better. Those words stayed with Emily. Because her father never spoke with anger. Even after being humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers, he still refused to hate Alexander. The taxi stopped outside a small brick house on the edge of town. It was the same house where Emily had grown up. The paint had faded years ago. The wooden porch creaked with every step. The garden was filled with flowers Margaret had planted herself. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. To Emily, it was priceless. She opened the front door. Everything inside remained exactly as she remembered. The old grandfather clock, the family photographs, the smell of fresh cinnamon from Margaret's kitchen. Nothing had changed, almost as though time itself had stopped inside those walls. Emily carried her wedding bouquet into the living room. She looked at it for several seconds, then quietly placed it beside a framed photograph of herself as a little girl sitting on Robert's shoulders. She smiled. I think this is where it belongs. Margaret turned away so Emily wouldn't see her crying again. Later that evening, Emily noticed something strange. Robert had disappeared into the attic. Nearly 30 minutes passed. When he finally came back down, his hands were covered in dust, and he was carrying a small wooden box. The box looked incredibly old. Its brass lock had turned green with age. Robert immediately noticed Emily staring. Without saying a word, he carried the box into his bedroom, locked the door, and stayed inside for almost an hour. Emily had lived in that house for 29 years. She had never seen that box before. When Robert finally came out, the box was gone. Dad, what was inside it? Robert froze. Only for a second. Then he smiled. Old memories. Emily laughed. You always say that. Robert kissed her forehead. Because sometimes, old memories are safer where they are. Before Emily could ask another question, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. The color immediately drained from his face. Margaret noticed it too. Robert, who is it? He didn't answer. He simply declined the call. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. Same number. This time, Robert turned the phone completely off. Emily frowned. Dad, I've never seen you do that before. Robert forced a smile. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because after everyone had gone to bed, Robert quietly walked outside alone. He looked up at the night sky. then whispered words no one else was supposed to hear. I kept my promise. For 29 years. I don't know how much longer I can. Behind the upstairs bedroom window, Emily had heard every single word. And for the first time in her life, she realized her parents weren't just hiding a secret. They were protecting someone. Emily barely slept that night. Her father's words echoed in her mind. I kept my promise for 29 years. A promise to whom? And why had he sounded so frightened? The next morning, Emily decided not to ask again. If her father wanted her to know, he would tell her. Instead, she helped Margaret prepare breakfast before driving to the small community center where she volunteered every Saturday. Children rushed toward her the moment she walked through the doors. Miss Emily, you came back. For 2 hours. The canceled wedding disappeared from her mind. She laughed, read stories, helped children paint. It reminded her why she had never measured life by money. Then her phone rang. It was David Harris, Alexander's best man. Emily almost ignored it. Instead, she answered, Emily, I know you don't want to hear from anyone connected to Alexander, but I think you need to know something. Emily remained silent. David continued. Alexander didn't go back to work. He canceled every meeting. He hasn't left his office since the wedding. Emily quietly replied. That was his choice. I know, but that's not why I called. Emily stopped walking. Someone came looking for your father yesterday. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? They asked Alexander where Robert Parker lived. Emily's voice became serious. Who? David hesitated. They never gave a name. They only said, it's time Robert finally returns what doesn't belong to him. The call ended. Emily stood frozen. That evening, she drove home faster than she ever had before. When she arrived, Robert was repairing an old rocking chair on the porch, as though nothing had happened. Dad, he smiled. You're home early. Emily sat beside him. Someone's looking for you. Robert's hands stopped moving, only for a moment. Then he continued sanding the chair. I figured they would. Emily's eyes widened. You know who they are? Robert sighed deeply. I hoped. They had forgotten. Before Emily could ask another question, a black luxury SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. Then another. And another. Neighbors quietly stepped outside to watch. 4 men in dark suits got out. One elderly gentleman followed behind them. He wasn't dressed like security. He carried himself with quiet authority. His silver hair was neatly combed. His walking cane looked older than Robert's workshop. The man stopped a few feet away. He looked directly at Robert. 30 long years seemed to pass between their eyes. Finally, he spoke. You kept your word. Robert slowly stood. I said I would. The old man nodded respectfully. I never doubted you. Emily looked from one man to the other, completely confused. Dad, who is he? Before Robert could answer, the elderly man smiled warmly. My name is William Ashcroft. I've been looking for your family for a very long time. Emily frowned. My family? William nodded. No. He gently corrected himself. The family that chose to become yours. Robert quietly closed his eyes. He knew. The day he had spent nearly 3 decades preparing for had finally arrived. Everyone moved inside. Margaret placed cups of tea on the table with trembling hands. William looked around the modest home. Nothing had changed. The old clock still ticked. The photographs still filled the walls. He smiled. So this is where she grew up. Robert nodded proudly. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every scraped knee. Every school play. William laughed softly. You kept every promise. Emily finally interrupted. Someone please tell me what's happening. William reached into his briefcase. He removed a faded notebook. Its leather cover was cracked with age. He placed it gently on the table. This belonged to your grandfather. Emily blinked. My grandfather died before I was born. William shook his head. No. He disappeared. Robert slowly looked at Emily. Your grandfather wasn't a wealthy man. He was a schoolteacher. But he uncovered evidence that exposed a powerful criminal network stealing millions from families through fake investment companies. Emily listened in silence. William continued. He refused every bribe. So they threatened his family. To protect his wife, his daughter, and his newborn granddaughter. He disappeared before they could use him against them. Emily whispered. My mother. Robert nodded. She spent years waiting for him. When she realized he wasn't coming home, she chose to raise you without telling anyone who he really was. William looked at Emily. Before she passed away from illness several years later, she made Robert promise something. Emily's voice trembled. What promise? Robert smiled through tears. She asked me never to let you spend your life chasing revenge. She wanted you to grow up choosing kindness over hatred. William added quietly. And if the day ever came when the danger was truly over, I was to return and tell you who your family really was. Emily looked at Robert. You knew all this and never told me? Robert nodded. Because every promise has its time. Emily burst into tears. She wrapped both arms around Robert and Margaret. You'll always be my parents. Robert smiled. And you'll always be our greatest blessing. Just then, a familiar voice came from the doorway. Emily. Everyone turned. Alexander stood there. Not in an expensive suit. Not with security. Not carrying flowers. Just a simple man who had come to admit he was wrong. He looked at Robert. I judged your bank account when I should have been looking at your character. Then he faced Emily. I can't undo what I said. But if you'll ever allow me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life becoming the man you deserved from the beginning. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled gently. Trust isn't rebuilt in one day. Alexander nodded. I know. I'll earn it. 6 months later, friends and family gathered once again. Not inside a grand cathedral, but in the peaceful garden behind Robert and Margaret's home. There were no reporters, no famous guests, no billionaires trying to impress anyone, only people who truly loved one another. This time, Robert proudly walked Emily down the aisle. Halfway there, he whispered, I'm glad you chose us. Emily smiled. I didn't choose wealth. I chose love. Robert squeezed her hand. And that's why you found both. As Alexander and Emily exchanged their vows, every person present understood one simple truth. Real wealth is never measured by what you own. It's measured by the promises you keep and the people you refuse to abandon. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd genuinely love to know. And if you enjoy powerful stories about love, family, sacrifice, and unforgettable twists, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.